My guest today is a man whose work has certainly helped change the world. Paul Conroy is a photographer and was the photographer who worked with Marie Colvin of the Sunday Times for several years and was with her in Syria when she was killed. Paul was injured in the leg and was trapped in Homs for several days. And, you know, a lot of people were very, very afraid of what would happen to him and whether he would make it out alive, but he did. And his story and Marie's story has been now told in lots of different ways, most principally right now in the biopic of Marie Colvin, A Private War. But there was also a documentary out a few months ago based on Paul's book, Under the Wire, which was based on his video footage, because as well as pictures, stills pictures, he took a lot of video when he was out with Marie. And so now you're a star of stage and screen, sort of thing.
Yeah, the lad's come a long way.
So it's very nice to see you here. And it's over 6 years.
Yeah, I think it's coming up for 7 in February.
Coming up for 7 years since Marie was killed and you were there. And it feels as though it must have dominated your life ever, that 7 years. Has it dominated those 7 years?
Yeah, it really has. I mean, initially when I came out, and I think John Snow was one of the first people I did an interview with after I'd had this huge operation.
In hospital?
In hospital. Yeah. But my kind of point of view was, look, it's not nice when journalists become the story. Nobody wants that. But I figured that as long as people were going to give me that opportunity to talk, point a camera in my face, that I would tell, Marie's story. But Marie was there to tell the people of Syria. She was there to do that. And it was just an opportunity to keep talking about what we'd gone to report. Because what we'd gone to report on hadn't ended. It just went deeper and deeper and deeper into what we've got now, 9 million people dead. I've always looked at it as I never really finished that assignment. I came out, did all the press I could to highlight the case of what we'd gone to report on. And then with the book, I thought, well, if a few more people read the book and get educated about what's happening in Syria, that's good. And then the films were another opportunity. And I think certainly with the drama, that's going to reach an audience that won't necessarily read the book or go and see a documentary. To get it out to millions of people is another way of keeping on that mission, telling the story. So it's been great in that sense.
When I told my wife I was interviewing you this morning, her first reaction was, oh, that's Jamie Dornan.
Sadly let down, it was me.
Because so you are being portrayed by Jamie Dornan on a big blockbuster movie. What's that like?
That's done me no harm at all. No, I mean, Jamie is a lovely guy, but it was a bit of a weird one. I mean, when I met him in Jordan, we met at the airport, and it was a bit, hello, you're going to be me, yeah. I'm going to be you. But we quickly solved that. We decided that the best way to do it was have a few nights in the bar, just get to know each other, and we've become really good friends.
He's done you and your voice incredibly well.
It's quite spooky at times.
What's your name?
Paul.
I'm Marie.
I know.
So you're freelance?
Always.
Any good?
The best.
Come on.
What now?
I need a photographer. I've never found one I like. Let's see how you do.
Now?
Yeah. You don't think I subscribe to all that, do you?
Where are we going?
Fallujah.
We can't just drive to Fallujah.
Why not?
Because we'll be targeted.
Are you scared?
No.
Good.
On the set, because we were dressed the same, carrying cameras, people would see us from a distance and be like, which one is
which
that?
One's which?
The resemblance stops at my stomach if you have a close look.
I mean, the thing that a lot of people are saying, especially people who knew Marie Colvin, is that Rosamund Pike's portrayal of Marie Colvin in that movie is stunning.
Oh, it really is.
Because you do blink and think it's her.
Yeah. I've never been around, good actors before. And I wasn't quite sure what good acting was. But I met Rosamund at the Frontline Club with Matt Heineman, and he said, this is going to be Marie. And this marble statuesque Rosamund. And I was like, right, okay, this should be interesting. But when she came out of that trailer, we were in Jordan shooting, I think, all the various war scenes and that were filmed near Amman. But she came out of that trailer, and I did have to look twice. You know, physically, the resemblance was astounding. But not just the makeup. It was the way she carried herself, the way she used her hands. You know, Marie walking through a crowded scene, you know, she looked like she was on the hunt, Marie. She would always, because of the eye patch and that, it was always quite a distinctive pose. And when I saw Roz, you know, doing this, the way she made her coffee and held her, you know, it was remarkable. She put so much in. She stayed in character for nearly a month. You know, occasionally I'd see Rosamund walk past in the hotel, but most of the time I would see Marie.
Let's wind back right at the beginning. Where are you from? What was your childhood?
Liverpool, Cardinal Godfrey High School, Liverpool, where I did two things. I was useless at everything except maths. No, I was useless at maths. Physics and chemistry, I loved making things go pop and boom. From there, I joined the army. I wanted to be a helicopter pilot.
How old were you?
16.
Right.
So it was quite young.
Straight
but it was
in, yeah.
Liverpool, late 70s, early 80s.
Not a lot of opportunities.
No, and I'd been in the Air Cadets for years. I used to go flying every weekend, flying gliders, and you know that to me was an amazing thing to do. So one of the easiest ways to become any kind of pilot was to join the army, do 2 years as a regular soldier, then volunteer to be a helicopter pilot. So I joined as a junior leader, did my year training, went off to Germany, and I think it was like the morning after I woke up in Germany, I went, oh, I don't want to do this anymore. But I'd left it the year too late to go, sorry, I don't want to do this anymore.
Why? What had happened?
I was also a musician. I played in a lot of bands and that, and I just realised I didn't want to spend I'd signed for 6 years. And it was like 2 days over my 1 year period when I could have got out. And as soon as I said that, they went like, well, no, we've just spent a lot of money training you. You're not just going like that. And I was like, right, I'll get out one way or the other. So it became like a little battle with me in the army. I'd disappear for a couple of weeks, go to Italy.
Trying to get thrown out?
Yeah, deliberately trying to get thrown out. And it just got worse and worse. The things I did got more and more atrocious.
What did you do?
Oh, God. I can remember one, this is a terrible story, I shouldn't really, but one that was they put me in the officer's mess bar ostensibly to keep me away from guns. I think that was the idea. And one night we had a desert island night, and so they said, make a punch for the officer's mess, and you come in a desert island outfit. I just had t-shirt and jeans ripped up. But I made this punch. It was like, I was serving it out, and I thought, oh, God, this is awful. Then this young officer cadet goes, I was just drinking like pints of it. And this officer guy, he'd only been there a few days, he was about 18, 17. He goes, Barman, should you be drinking? And I was like, oh. And to my great shame, I stood on the bar and just hit this officer, thinking...
Sorry, I shouldn't laugh either.
I know. Young soldiers, don't do this. Thinking this is it. Surely they have to get rid of me now. But they knew, because they knew what I was doing. The biggest.
So they didn't discipline?
No, they called me in the commander's office the next morning. He goes, they gave me 2 extra bar duties. And I was like, this is never going to happen.
So you were hoping for a court-martial?
Yeah, court-martialing out. That's all I wanted. By then it was like open warfare. They knew exactly what I wanted. I knew their tricks. So it was like...
And this lasted 6 years?
Yeah, nigh on 6 years. So I think that's where my kind of tenacity comes from.
And did you ever so you never made it to the Air Corps?
No.
Because of this?
Because of this, yeah. Once I realised I wanted out, my devotion to doing anything properly diminished, till in the end. I think that was all he could do with me, stick me in the bar.
And so did you end up leaving because you'd served your time, or because...
No, but even the worst bit is, all the little times I was in the Army guardhouse, like 6 weeks and 4 weeks, doesn't come off your final 6 years. So the longer I was in there, I'd been in about 4 years and I still had 6 years to go. I'd spent most of it in the guard. So it was like, I really have to get this done. So in the end, I planted a big lump of hash in my pocket and then wrote a note and slipped it under the battery commander's door, grassing myself up. And then he come to search my room the next day and he couldn't find it. I was like, oh, for heaven's sake. I had to tell my mate, it's in my top pocket. He went, ha-ha, we've got you now. So eventually I got court-martialed and thrown out.
For possession of cannabis.
of a bit of weed, yeah. Then my way into this was the Balkans occurred. And I had some mates who were taking an aid convoy down through Albania up to
So this is the early 90s?
Yeah. So this all kicked off, and they said, look, do you want, I'd always taken pictures and played with video cameras when they started coming through. And they were like, we're taking an aid convoy. It was the craziest convoy. It was a bunch of anarchists, a bunch of Sikhs from Birmingham. There were some guys who had budget rental trucks that should never have left the country. So we got this convoy together. We were driving through Italy, we got to Albania, and they were one lot going, we'll go this way, and the other lot were going this way. And I remember filming it, and there was all of these people taking a vote on which way they should go. And there's a couple of guys, and I said, Charlie, are you not voting? He goes, Paul, I'm an anarchist. How can I vote? And it was just this. And in the end, we got to Kosovo. We got to the border with Albania, and I remember them kind of giving this aid out. And these guys were coming out of Kosovo, and they were throwing them nylon crimpline flares, and these were all in Nike and that, and they're going, "What's this?" and kind of throwing the aid away. So that was kind of comical.
But that's when you picked up the camera.
That's when on that border, which was was really awful scenes of people coming out. And I was up there with the camera, and I think like everybody who does this, initially putting a camera in someone's face in that situation is an awkward thing to do. You don't know if you're intruding. But I kind of got over that hump when I started speaking to the people who'd come out of the villages and made it to the border. And I realized that when everyone's been through that experience, the whole village, they don't really talk amongst it with themselves because they've all been through it. So when they got to that border, the actual desire of the people to tell the story, it was almost, that was all they had left was, if somebody stood there and listened to their story, that seemed to offer them something that they couldn't get from each other. Because if you've all lost a child or you've all lost a parent, nobody has the tops on that grief. So I just got sucked in, so to speak. I wanted to know more about what was happening. So the convoy went back. They said, we're leaving. And I said, well, look, I'm going to stay. The way I looked at it, I was interested in what the people were going through because I'd seen all the military side of war. And, that tied up nicely with what Marie, eventually when we met, that was, we were both interested in this whole thing about war being very neat and clinical and precise nowadays. Smart bombs. Remember the smart bombs going down chimneys and individual tanks? As we know, the reality isn't always that smart. Most bombs are dumb.
I mean, tell us about meeting Marie, because when you met her, you were kind of regarded as a bit of a clown.
I was a pariah. We'd all been in Commishley, which was northeastern. It was before the last Iraq war. And there was about 40 press trying to get in. I just got fed up waiting. So I got our driver to go and buy me 4 big lorry inner tubes and a pile of wood and some string. And I built, in my hotel room in the desert, I built a raft, which was kind of weird when I remember looking out the window at the desert raft.
Yes.
Desert raft.
What am I going to do with this?
And then I gave the guy some money to go and bribe the guards on the way to the Tigris River. I persuaded 2 mates of mine who were staying there at the time to come along with us. So we got the raft to the water at midnight. We could see Iraq.
How far away was it?
It was about 300-400 yard crossing on the Tigris, but we'd recce'd it before the snow had melted. So by the time we got there, what had now been a nice placid river was now a bit of a torrent. As we were pumping it up, there were a few shots fired, and I think a Syrian army patrol had spotted us. So we kind of scoot down the river. Long story short, we were eventually captured and taken in by the Syrian secret police, who interrogated us for a day or 2. We were passed back to the General Omar, who let us go in the end. And we were told to get out of Syria. We were kicked out. I stayed, the other 2 did leave, and I was like, oh, it'll be a few days, I'll wait, it'll be all right. And so that night in the bar, no one else had talked to me because they all wanted the permission. So I was like sitting on my own with her. And then Marie walked in, she went, who and where is the boatman? I was like, oh. And she walked over and she went, boatman, I like your style. Marie Colvin, can I buy you a whiskey? And I was like, yes, you can. And that was it. And she just loved it. You know, she'd never have sat for a month waiting for permission. You know, the first day she was told no, she'd have been off. And, you know, she was going to sail from Israel into Gaza on a 2-man dinghy. So I think that was why we hit it off initially so well.
And how much did you work together after that?
The first real in the field stuff was later. That was in Egypt when that kicked off. And I'd been in Libya for about a month from March. So I sent a lot of pictures back for the Sunday Times. And they were like, you know, Marie, will you go back, meet her in Libya, in Egypt, and then go in? And that's when I think we spent from March, I think it's where we met you on the road going in one time.
Going into Tripoli.
Yeah. So we went in through Egypt initially, got to Benghazi, and it kind of moved on a bit from Benghazi, and Misrata was starting to look really that the place that Gaddafi had gone right. The Misratans and Gaddafi, that there was always an unease. So we kind of got ourselves in on a boat, and that's the day we arrived as Tim Hedrington and Chris Honduras were both killed, and they were shipping out. And at that point, there was a bit of an exodus of press because of that. We stayed for the whole of the siege. And then as it progressed, we went out and back in through the other side.
I mean, a lot of the reality is in Under the Wire and in the documentary, and that is the story of what happened in Syria.
Yeah.
At great length and in great detail. How difficult was it to remember, for a start, everything in that kind of detail?
When I came out of Syria and I woke up in hospital, you know, there was a lot of people talking, you know, about what could happen with your mind. So I went through, in my hospital bed, that's one of the only things I could do. I kind of went through every day of that assignment because it was burnt into my head anyway. And I think, you know, I hoped I got it right. And it was our translator, Weil, who's seen in Under the Wire. He said he read the book when it came out, and he said he was amazed. He said, how you remembered all of that. He said, there's one thing you got wrong. And I was like, oh my God, you know, I've dropped a big clanger. And I'm going, what was it? And he goes, when you were blown up and we dragged you in the building and we gave you a cigarette, he said, you said I lit the cigarette. He said, it wasn't me. It was Abu Haneen lit the cigarette. And I was like, that's it? And he was like, yeah. And I was like, whew, that. And the simple fact is I didn't want to have anything biting me in a couple of years' time, like people saying, you know, talk about it. I got that chance with doing all of the press and then the book.
What was your role in the decision to go in? You know, was it Marie's decision that you went along with, or was it a joint decision?
No, it was a joint decision because before we went in, we sat for about 3-4 days in a hotel room in Beirut. And, you know, normally you don't get the opportunity to view on a laptop where you're going. And in this case, we did. And we had, the activists there had cameras up, and you could see Baba Amra getting shelled, getting hammered. And me and Marie would sit there and we'd look at it and we go, that's where we're going. You know, if anyone at any point feels they don't want to do it, then that's the decision is made by the person who doesn't want to do it. And, you know, at the time, it didn't seem that unreasonable to us. You know, obviously with hindsight, you can look back at it and go, that was a fatal decision that we made. It was a fatal decision. But at the time, it wasn't. You know, we weren't sitting there, you know, when me and
most other people looked at that footage and thought, we can't go there, it's too dangerous.
Yeah. But when we said we're going, you know, at the time, it wasn't, you know, we're just going to do it and be damned. You know, we considered the risk. I'd already been in a couple of weeks earlier. So, you know, Marie hadn't. So I told her, I said, it's not easy. It is a bit touch and go at times. And, you know, Marie wasn't stupidly on there. You know, Marie was terrified of stuff like that. You know, the bravest part of Marie was overcoming her fear of what was to come. And I always knew when she'd go very quiet on that trip in. And I knew that's when she was particularly mentally having she'd already been blown up, she'd been through it. And to go back
It's been blown up in Sri Lanka.
In Sri Lanka,
where she
lost the use of her eye. So, we were both, and I was, we were both scared, but it didn't seem, with seeing the film, the movie, and the documentary, you look and you go, it was a bit whatever, but it wasn't like that at the time. And, as you progress into these situations, you slowly become acclimatized to your environment. So initially being passed in the dark at night and running across fields and through tunnels and that seems initially, it's like, whew. But after a week, you've acclimatized so that you keep, it's like progressive steps into the darkness.
But your approach as a team to going into these situations, it seems to me, was different to other journalists, certainly to broadcast journalists.
Yeah.
You were prepared to go into the unknown in a way that most of us just don't, because we tend to take decisions, in groups with bosses back in the office and lots of people assessing risks.
Yeah.
And that didn't seem to happen in the same way, or maybe we just didn't see it in the film. But
I think it is as you say, there is a group. I talked to Lindsay about this, and she says, I have a camera and I have a producer. We have a chain. We had kind of that. We have an editor and a picture editor, but we also had, because there were two of us, we had a degree of autonomy. To two people making a decision is quite a fast process, yay or nay. And
do you think your ex-army background made the Sunday Times office more relaxed about where you were going?
Yeah, I think they had that conversation.
They sort of saw you as a security advisor as well.
Yeah, in one. I think after they saw some of the footage and stuff we were sending back from Libya, from Misrata, and I think Miles, who I'd worked with before as well, I think on one of our breaks they said, is Paul pushing it too far? And both of them said, actually, no, Paul is the one who was saying, we're going to storm that building. I'm going, go in the second wave, let the guys with the guns go in first. And if they come out or they carry on, then it's probably a bit safer than going in the first wave. And so I think they knew that. I think they got that once they got to know me, that I wasn't actually a gung-ho idiot. I'd look at situations from a military perspective.
But going into Homs, you had to go through this tunnel. Now, in the film, in the Under the Wire film, that tunnel looks absolutely terrifying. Now, there's a reconstruction there, but I mean, how accurate is that?
Oh, that's incredibly. And that, if you look at the actual footage we got of the tunnel, it's just not long enough. So they built that tunnel exactly, slightly more oval in life, but the conditions and what you see, I think in the film doesn't tell you it's 3 kilometers long. So when we were put into the tunnel just outside of Homs, we thought we were going into a tunnel that went under the highway so we wouldn't be shot at on the highway. Nobody actually told us it was 3 kilometers long. So when we got in, it was like, oh, this is not too bad. And then we felt it getting deeper and deeper and hotter, and the oxygen was getting used up. And it was an absolute nightmare, that tunnel. I think doing it once was horrible. And we did it 4 times. I did it 4 times.
You went in, you came out,
went in,
and
came out,
back in again.
Went back in. And that second time of going back in, once you've done that tunnel, there was something about ignorance is bliss.
I mean, okay, you've explained the initial decision to go, but what happened was you went, and then you left.
Yeah.
Because you thought the Syrian army were moving in.
Yeah. And
then you decided to go back in, or Marie decided she wanted to go back in.
Yeah.
And at that point, the stakes were much higher, surely.
Yeah, I mean, it was joint. We were outside of we got kind of a night off, so to speak, in Al Buwaida, the town where we filed from. At that point, I thought we'd messed up as well by coming out. It was at that point it was mutual. It only changed when, as the closer we got to the tunnel going back in, we were sat in this little building, and you could hear Baba Amra getting hammered a couple of miles away. The shelling was ferocious. We just sat in this building, and we were Wild, the translator, and Marie and me. And I just got this most awful feeling of dread. It was like, hang on. Every instinct in my body was going. this feels wrong, going back in through that tunnel into that. And so I said to Marie and I said, listen, I've got something to say. I'm not going to ignore this. I said, I've got a bad feeling. I said, I feel like something really bad's going to happen. And they both listened, and Marie listened, and she said, well, okay. I'm the journalist, you're the photographer. If you want to go home, you can. I'm going back in. Now, obviously, I would never, I've left my partner to go back. So it was like, okay, said what I've got to say. That's it. It wasn't brought up again. It was it was like, okay, you've listened. I know Marie. She's not, if I can't stop her, no one's going to. The paper didn't even know we were going back in. We just turned our phones off and slipped in. So I said what I had to say. And after that, it was like, you can't keep that in your mind because you can't do your job when you go in. You can't be thinking that.
So you weren't going in thinking this is a mistake? No.
I said me piece, and I just had to suck it up and get that feeling gone because you need your senses about. You can't walk around that place like a shivering leaf. You have to commit. And once that discussion was had, of course, we were going to go in.
What was driving her?
There were also 28,000 women and children in that place getting hammered by heavy artillery. To Marie, that was the biggest injustice. That's what she existed for. She was renowned. Chechnya, stayed a bit too long, had to do this escape. Sri Lanka, East Timor, she stayed and stayed. And she really believed that if we stayed and if we got more stories out and if we got the pictures out, that we could actually stave off the sense of slaughter that we were witnessing.
She thought she would change the world.
Yeah. I mean, that's why she did. Ultimately, that is why she was there.
Is that why you were there too?
Yeah. I believed if we could tell the story better, you always feel you can do a better story next time. And if you get the pictures, you can prevent. We were seeing this as the land forces.
What did you think you could prevent? The Syrian land forces moving in?
Yeah, we thought that if we got the story out to the world, that the world would go, hang on, this army is going to destroy civilians here. Shouldn't we? We've got governments, we have international structures, we have the United Nations. We have a moral responsibility to stop the slaughter of civilians, but all we can do is take the story out, go, here it is, world. What are you going to do? And the world did very little for 7 years, and it's still doing very little.
Because that's what you thought. You thought, get this news out, and the world will intervene.
Yeah.
Because you also decided that you didn't really have time to file the traditional way for the Sunday Times. So
that's right.
Marie then started doing broadcasts.
Yeah.
She came up on Channel 4 News.
That's right.
In fact, the night before she was killed. Let's just hear a bit of that.
The Syrians are not allowing civilians to leave. Anyone who gets on the street, if they're not hit by a shell, they're sniped. There's snipers all around Bab al-Amr on the high buildings. I think the sickening thing is the complete merciless nature. They are hitting civilian buildings absolutely mercilessly and without caring. And the scale of it is just shocking.
And so did you still think that you were making a difference at that stage?
Yeah, I mean, really, the situation after we'd gone in, it got so bad that we had to have a talk. And the conversation went, look, Marie, it's Tuesday. A lot of the people who'd taken us in were killed. The people were dying off around us. And it was a case of, look, Marie, we're not going to be filing a story by Friday. I don't think we're going to make it. And she agreed, and that's why we did them interviews. We talked to the activists in the media centre. We said, look, we're going to do Channel 4, BBC, CNN. If we do this, it will bring some form of response. They won't like this going out live from the middle of this slaughter. And they were quite adamant, that's what you're here to do, to tell this story.
Well, because you thought that if you waited for the normal deadline of a Sunday paper, you'd be dead.
Yeah, we really didn't believe.
And so you thought what you were doing by going on air was...
It was the last-ditch
saving
attempt.
Everyone's lives, including your own.
Yeah. We kind of thought it was a last-ditch attempt. We got that far. If something bad was going to happen to us, we kind of figured that it should at least have the benefit of getting the story that we went to tell out.
At what point were you thinking you'd get out?
That was it. There was the kind of, we were planning to leave the next morning. 5, 6 a.m. But, you know, it was optimistic that we were going to make that. The way in was becoming harder and harder. The bombardment, everything was intensifying to a point where we thought, well, you know, we've got this far. What do we do? Do we just try and escape and probably not be able to get out anyway? Or do we at least, you know, and I think anyone who sees that footage of the baby and Marie's, you know, actual report from that night, you know, I was certainly, you know, I was there and I was moved by it. The world did look when it saw that. And, you know, especially when that footage was promoted in, you know, valued by Marie dying, you know, it was all of a sudden the international community did look. And, you know, those of us that were left, eventually when we got out, we thought maybe this will be the turning point where the world does look and go, you know, this is women and children who are bearing the real brunt of this. This is a regime using, you know, this is a war fighting machine with wide area battlefield weapons, killing civilians, you know, randomly. You know, we genuinely believe, I think most journalists believe that they don't write or shoot or do whatever they do in the hope that they wanted to make a difference. They wanted to affect an outcome, affect opinion. And that's what we thought we were doing.
Do you remember the actual moment when that rocket hit?
Yeah. I mean, it's burnt into my memory. Yeah, it was just, there were 3, one at the back, the room we'd been sleeping in, took that out. That kind of really filled the building with smoke. I was looking for my camera, realised I'd left it in the back room in a bag, ran in, the room was gone, saw the bag, grabbed it, came back in, the next one hit out the front. Then one took the roof, the ceiling, and at that point, I bent down to pick my camera up to get a shot of this kind of chaos. And then it was just an almighty metallic, an explosion. But, you know, I kind of didn't get knocked over, and I didn't even know I'd been hit. But at that point, I couldn't see anything in that room. It was black and, you know, slightly deafened by the actual intensity of the explosion. And I'd felt something hit my leg. I thought I'd just bit a brick, so I kind of bent down, felt my leg, and my hand literally went through my leg and popped out the other side. And I was like, whoa. And that, when I had my most idiotic 10 seconds of my life, happened at that moment, because I actually stood with my hand in my leg, going, oh my God. And I had just this image of hospital food. And I was like, oh no. All that leathery pork and soft potatoes and jelly.
That's your future.
And that this is what I've got to go through now. That's awful. And then I went, oh, hang on, people can bring me food in. And then I kind of went, oh, right, I'm back. Put a tourniquet on my leg. And, you know, that's when I kind of went crawling. And I found Marie and Remy at that point. But, you know, obviously in shock and trying to stem the flow of blood. But the attack was carried on then. After that moment, they must have seen people moving in the rubble. I think they had a drone above. And then they carried on for about 15 minutes. So I kind of laid there next to Marie for 15 minutes trying to stop my leg. I found an Ethernet cable, wrapped that round and got a stick and a piece of wood. And after about 15 minutes, that's when they dragged me back inside. And they beat me up, gave me a cigarette. I do remember it didn't hurt at all. It was quite astonishing that there was no pain. It was only when I got the cigarette and I was leaning against the wall that I went, actually, it stings a little bit. And then 20 minutes later, that's really quite sore.
Well, you're obviously in survival mode at that stage.
Yeah,
You're in shock.
I think the signals that I was coming back was when I sat there and had a smoke. My body went, okay, that trauma's over. And that's when I started to feel things again and be in shock.
When did you start to feel things emotionally?
It was quite some time. It was, I remember laying there and I was quite disgusted with myself because I didn't feel anything. I could see Marie laying there and I felt awful because I felt nothing. And that's something I think Weil also says in the documentary. It was just emotionally, I was a blank. And it was kind of about 18 hours later when I was taken into this room after they'd done what they could for my leg. They put me in the room. It was about 2, 3 in the morning, and that's when it started to dawn on me what had actually happened. You know, Marie was gone, Remy was gone.
Just tell us about Remy, because we haven't talked about Remy.
Yeah, I mean, Remy Oshler, he was a French photographer. It was wonderful. He started to win a lot of awards, and he had a good eye. He got there, and 6 hours later, he was dead. And that's the tragedy, the fact that they let them in when really, at that point, really everybody should have been getting out. But
how did you get out in the end? I mean, there was a long process of sort of, would you get out? Would you get in an ambulance? It was all too risky, and you feared they were going to.
Oh, we were told quite, the guy said to us, you will be executed if you get in an ambulance, and your body will be thrown on the battlefield, and we'll make it out that the rebels attacked the ambulance. So, when someone says that, it's like, okay.
Who said that?
That was the doctor who led the Red Crescent exhibition at ambulances in. We cleared the room, and we said, look, come on. And he just went, do not get in the ambulance. He was the guys who'd come to get us out, and he was telling us, the guy's dead now, unfortunately. He was killed a few months after that. But the process of getting out was, we knew the tunnel existed, but what happened is the ambulances drove off after we said we're not doing it. The ambulances drove off, and I remember sitting there going, things can't get any worse than this. And as I said it, the door opened, and this rebel came in. He goes, Paul, bad news. And I'm going, what? There is no more bad news. We've had all of that. And he went, the tunnel's been blown up. Yeah. And we were like, I was like, what? So that was our hope, was the tunnel, but it was blown up. A shell had come right in and poof, cut it in half. So the ambulances are gone. We've been injured for 2 days now. We're there. The ambulances are gone. The tunnel's blocked. And they were just trying to come up with any plan, but the ground forces were closing in. It was getting tighter. The bombardment was 24 hours a day at this point. They knew where we were. They wanted us done. So they just had the location for the house. So the house we were in was slowly falling to pieces. Bits were falling in and crashing. And in the end, it came down to they got all of the sick and injured they could possibly get in about 4 trucks, put everyone in them, and we just drove. Literally, if you can imagine the front line is there, we just drove straight at the front line with headlights on, everything. It was the last ditch, it was either...
And came under attack.
Oh, God, they threw everything.
A lot of people were killed.
Yeah, it was like 20 people killed getting past that stage. And it was carnage. They literally drove us through the front line. And, I'd fallen. I was in the front. I'd fallen because my leg wasn't that good. I'd kind of slipped into the well. And it was just phenomenal. I've never seen anything like this, because they knew there was no point in being stealthy. They just had to if they could get through to that tunnel. And that's where we ended up. It was just this, insane ride to the tunnel.
What was left of it?
What was left, yeah. And because I'm thinking, why are we at the tunnel? It's been blown up. Then he tied a rope around me, dropped me down this hole into the tunnel. And that's, for me, that's one of the most important parts, is when they put me in that tunnel, I looked around and it was like women and children all huddled. And there was a motorbike ready to go down the tunnel. And they're saying, get on the bike. And I'm going, I can't. I said, there's women and kids. I can't be getting out. And they said, don't you get it? They're going, your friends are all dead. Our friends are dead. Their families are dead. And they said, you have to tell our story because we've been telling this story for months and the world isn't listening. They might believe you, basically. He said, and I was, it was a bit of a process. I'm going, I can't just, there's something, I'm English. Women and children first. And they were like, no, not in this case. And in the end, they got fed up with me and just dragged me and put me on it and said, tell the story, tell our story. And I take that seriously. When they said that, I said, okay, I'll tell you a story. And that's, that's one of the reasons I have engaged so much with the media, the films, the books, is to keep telling their story. Because to me, they're still there, what's left of them. What's
happened in Syria, though, is that similar things have happened in different parts of the country, whether it was in Aleppo or different front lines. The Syrian army does the same thing. I've seen it from the other side. Yeah. I've seen it from the Syrian army side. There's a lot of bombardment, and then they move in, they take over a place, and terrible things happen on the ground. And despite the fact that people like you and Syrian journalists and people like Ward, who told a lot of our
Phenomenal
stories
work.
from Aleppo. It's all just carried on. So the question is, does it change anything?
If it doesn't change it, I mean, I'm asked this often, why'd you do it if it doesn't change anything? Well, at the time, you hope it's going to change something. I don't think you can ever quite know the outcome of what you do. So we were there, we told our story when we came out. We were hoping that we could push the world into what they rightly should. There should be some responsibility, moral responsibility, not to watch this happen. At least we could say, you can't say you weren't told. That was one aspect of it. We can do so much, we can tell the story. I think that, I think the international community, and personally, I think it behaved abysmally. There was this view from the West that if we look away long enough, someone else will sort this out. And someone else did sort this out. The Iranians came in, the Russians in particular, Putin came in. And, while the world was carefully not looking and hoping someone else would take responsibility and would take a lead, unfortunately the Russians did. And they, that process of, Aleppo and Duma and Ghouta, that was a Russian-led initiative. I think the regime were nearly at a very precarious point till the Russians came in. We abdicated responsibility a long time ago. The people who put the money and the weapons and the time in were the Russians, the Iranians, Hezbollah pushed a lot. They're the people who are sitting at the table now. And personally, I think, that a lot of leading politicians have a lot of blood on their hands for the way they kind of ignored red lines in the sand. That we sat and watched people being gassed. I can remember the day that they made the agreement to take the chemical weapons out of Syria. And I did a BBC piece, and they said, you must be delighted that they're taking the chemical weapons out. And I was like, well, doesn't it actually mean that we're saying, carry on killing people with conventional weapons? As long as you kill them with the right weapons, we're not objecting. Just try not to gas them. If I was a Syrian parent and I was burying my child, I wouldn't be too fussed about whether it was a bullet, a bomb, or a chemical weapon. That the signal that sent. You can't play games like that with the Russians. Putin and co. have been in power a long time. I think, that kind of extended the problem there.
And so do you apply that to Britain's decision not to intervene as well?
Absolutely, I think.
I mean, when you say blood on their hands, you think
David
British
Cameron,
politicians have got blood on their hands?
And Miliband and Cameron, when that vote came, when Cameron came to take that vote, whether we intervene, they were promised up until the last minute that they would get the backing from the Labour Party, and then that was withdrawn. And I think essentially politicians voted on the wrong war. They say generals always fight the last battle. I think when they voted on whether to take action in Syria because of the use of chemical weapons, they were voting on the Iraq war. And I think they made a mistake. We were actually, we should have had a degree of moral certitude about this. And they didn't. They voted for political reasons not to do that. And I think that is, I would say that they have blood on their hands.
I mean, it's also true that what they were trying to learn from Iraq was, what do you do afterwards?
Yeah. Oh no.
And and the fear was that Syria would just get worse.
Of course. I had a conversation with David Cameron when I was in hospital, and he said, "What's happening? What's going on? Downing Street cold." And I said, "Look, it's still at the point where there isn't a big, massive vow. This was early." I said, "There's not a huge vacuum of power now." I said, "But if that develops, then you will get the jihadists will come in." This was very early in the conflict. I said, my conversation with them was, why not have safe havens? I said, if you have havens where people can go to, when the jihadists come in, they won't be given such a warm, fervent welcome. Because if you're a civilian and the only person between you and a regime tank is ISIS or Al-Qaeda, you're not going to ask too many questions at that point. And that's exactly what happened. I said, but if you give them somewhere to go, a safe haven, a no-fly zone, as worked in Iraq with the Kurds for many years, it was, a non-invasive way of keeping people safe.
And what did he say?
They said, we'll discuss, everything's on the table. And Clinton was pushing for that. Hillary Clinton was pushing for that. And I think they missed that opportunity because when ISIS came in, And it gave Assad the cover to carry on in Aleppo and Douma and Ghouta, and all of the places they emptied were done while we were bombing Raqqa and ISIS. It became very messed.
So the people who you were with in Homs, they were not Islamists?
Absolutely not. I can remember they said one guy showed up, espousing jihad and that, and they put a bag on his head and shipped him out to Tripoli in northern Lebanon. They were absolutely not. At that point, these people were out on the streets asking for democracy and changes to the constitution for free. And they weren't out on the streets screaming for Sharia law.
Because things have changed so much now, haven't they?
People forget this.
When I've been on the Syrian government side of the line during a ceasefire, and they say, well, in theory, you could cross.
Yeah.
The truth is, I wouldn't cross.
No.
Because I know the people on the other side would want to kill me.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is, that's changed a lot in the last years. That crossing of the front line is like, we obviously were never going to go from where we were into government-controlled territory. But I completely understand, because of the nature of the way that conflict has become. You'd be crackers to do that.
But it's interesting that you haven't lost your faith in the power of reportage.
No. And I think it would be a much, if every time you took a knock and something didn't get the result you wanted, people just gave in, I think the world would be quite a much darker place. And there are people who are still doing it. We weren't unique. There are people out there doing this all the time. And certainly in this day and age, journalism is taking a hammer and, being killed in consulates, being murdered in Europe, investigative journalists. We've got the fake news, we've got Trump. Journalism is taking a knock. And I think that behind the scenes there are people still out there. And I think, hopefully these films will show a bit of an idea of what journalists can do or will do or prepared to do to get the news. If
you and Marie were still out on the road, where would you be going now?
I think we'd probably be stuck in Yemen somewhere. I think that is one of the conflicts. Of course, people are going in, but that would be somewhere that, I would be getting a call. Get your stuff together. We're going in. There's so many places in the world that bad things are happening. But I suspect that would be somewhere like that.
And what do you think the lesson is for journalists from what happened to you and Marie, in terms of the decisions you have to take on the ground? Because obviously, I'm guessing it's impossible for you to say it was a mistake to go in, even though. Yeah,
would I change Marie being
obviously
killed? Obviously, it goes without saying.
But you don't want to say you were wrong, do you?
No,
go?
I don't think we were wrong. Although a bad outcome occurred, I don't think we were wrong. So how would you do? How should people do things differently, or how would you do things differently if it hadn't worked out like that? God, blind, that really is tricky.
Because there has to be a lesson, doesn't there?
Yeah.
From an instance in which you take a massive risk and one of you gets killed.
There's no story is worth dying for.
Yeah.
And I firmly believe that. And, I know she did. Because if you're dead, you can't tell the story. Occasionally take a step back if you're in that position and just take a bit of time, because you can get sucked into this process time, can we do this? Maybe a little bit of time, little pauses for reflection on occasion and assess situations. But, even with that, I had pause for reflection. Marie was not the easiest person to, she was wonderful. She wasn't the easiest person in the world to get stuff to.
And what would you say to young people who want to do what you've done?
I think the world does need people like this, So I always get told off, if you have a passion for it, try and do it. That's the only way. That's how I got into it. I went there. I'm not encouraging people to just run into war zones who aren't,
So you had army training?
I had army training, and I think I was quite aware. But I do say try and do it. I think if you're an editor and you get 50 letters on your desk with proposals or ideas, or you get a great piece of writing, or you get a great set of photographs on your desk about, I know a lot of people who started that way, Ruth Sherlock, many people. I think there's no better training than doing it and getting your work in. I just think that's.
But you meet a lot of both clueless and crazy people out there. Who, I mean, Syria particularly attracted a lot of people who just went out there with cameras.
As did Libya, and that's not what I'm espousing. I'm saying if you have a passion for it, and if your reasons are right, and you're not just, if you think you're going to go to one of these places and get your kicks running around, there's nothing nice about getting shot at or shelled. It's a horrible, nasty thing to happen. So and I know you do get people, who kind of drawn to the idea of it. I think they don't go back once they've had a taste of the real thing. But I'm talking about people with a passion who really want, it's about making a difference. It's about advocating and promoting change or awareness. And if you've got all of that, then, yeah.
There are two questions I want to ask you, and I can't think of a very sensitive way to ask them, so I'm just going to ask them.
Shoot.
Do you ever feel angry with Marie for putting you in that situation and for nearly getting you killed?
No, because I really look on it. We were a team. I wasn't following her around doing what she wanted. If I didn't want to go into Syria, I'd have gone, this for a game of soldiers. I'm not going into that. I wouldn't have stepped foot in the first place. So no, not at all. Her sister worried about that. Kat. She was always worried that Marie was a bit of a bully and that she felt responsible on my behalf. And, I never knew that until somebody told me that's what she felt. There's also a little thing that most people don't know. When we made that decision, I told her about my fears and something dreadful was going to happen. 5 minutes after we left that building and got into the tunnel and went in, the wall that we were leaning against, what they didn't tell us, behind it was 750 kilos of TNT they had stored. And a shell landed in the garden 5 minutes after we left. And an area for about a quarter mile circle was vaporized. There was nothing left of the people or the building. I only found that out about a year ago. And I told Kat, and she went, that makes me feel not as bad about you agreeing to go back in. But no, there's no anger. We went in, I went in with my eyes wide open.
And the other one is sort of how, do you have any survivor's guilt?
Yeah. I mean, I know a lot of people died getting us out at that point. Not just me, but wounded Syrians as well. But yeah, I do. I think, God, I'm here. There are 20 Syrian families there without their offspring or mums or dads, whatever. That plays on my mind. So it's not been cheap for me. It's not like I came out and I've had this great book and films. That's at a cost. And the cost of that is, okay, I was there to do something that they appreciated, and I appreciate they did. But, when people die, they're real deaths, they're real people. To me, they're not anonymous numbers. When I look at Baba Amra, I think of families decimated. And there's a part of me that, a great deal. I hope I've done my bit on their behalf, which kind of, when I don't do anything for a while, I do start to feel incredibly guilty that I'm not doing anything about this. I'm not talking, I'm not writing, I'm not, and so there is a part of me, because of that promise I made in the tunnel to tell their story, while it's still happening, it's not that easy to just turn off the TV and go, oh, it's over. It's not over.
I mean, the prism through which we, this interview is ways to change the world. I mean, we've talked about what the international community perhaps should have done in Syria and could do still, not just in Syria. I mean, do you have any particular ways that you would change the way these things are done?
The United Nations, I think, is broken. I think it really is desperately broken. I mean, one of the major ways I can think of actually bringing about a change is remove the power of veto from the top 5 to make it less easy for a country to just sit on its hand and change and stop any change. The fact that China will abstain most of the time, Russia will veto. I think the world has moved on a lot since the League of Nations and the formation of the United Nations. And I think the fact that the big 5 at the table wield so much power over a world, it should be the United Nations, but we got the big boys at the table. I think that is one way of actually changing the dynamics of it, because it becomes moribund. Nothing happens. I don't know why when people, I think there's enough evidence, and not just anecdotal evidence, real hard, solid evidence that war crimes have been committed. This seems such a glacial process of doing anything about this. I think the world has to find new and improved methods for dealing with these things, which, these aren't things that happen occasionally. This is quite a regular, these people who like to work in
several lifetimes of
yeah,
reportage all over the world.
Yeah. It should be an imperative, not just a moral, but a legal imperative that if people are obviously getting slaughtered, it shouldn't be an option of doing nothing. I think in international law there is an imperative that we murdered civilians. There should be some action. Doing nothing is doing nothing. It's not political strategy, and that to me, from my perspective, seems to be what's happened. It's most definitely a case of, is it over? Is it? Oh, it's nearly there, and that's where I think we are at the moment. We've got the court case in the States, which is due to announce, I think, any day now, which will actually. But I think, I hope if we get it, we'll put a legal stamp on my theory that we were deliberately targeted. The amount of evidence that's being presented will, one way or another say, yes, you were correct in your assumptions. So I think with Syria, my colours are very firmly nailed to the mast that, this regime really must be held to account in some way. And it's a civil case, but maybe that's the start. From small acorns, bigger things will grow. Because I think, one thing that people of Syria deserve is some sort of justice. And if these people are just given back power and these people are put back in the box, I don't think I could rest comfortably with that.
Paul Conroy, thank you very much indeed. Thanks for sharing your ways to change the world and that amazing story.